Welcome in lacrosse fans to the Utah Lax Report. I'm your host, Tim Haslam. This week's podcast features Nick Gradinger, who is the founder of Vessel Kitchen, one of the sponsors of the Utah Lax Report. Nick hails from San Diego and ended up playing at Cornell and Denver before making his way to Park City, but he explains all that in the podcast, so go give it a listen. Also this week, the UHSAA RPIs were released, and so I've got a full breakdown on the site of what that means, what a bracket may look like if the season ended today. Obviously, all that will change as the games are played, but definitely something fun to look at as we look at what the playoffs might look like. Hope you enjoy the show and my interview with Nick. Welcome to the show, Nick. How are you?
Good, Tim. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it. You've got a great story. I'm really excited for this podcast. You've played Ivy League lacrosse. You've started a successful restaurant. Super excited to talk and let the people out there know the man behind the Vessel Kitchen. So thanks for coming on.
I appreciate that.
Tell me, we'll start out with the basics. When did you start playing lacrosse?
So I started playing lacrosse in 8th grade. I'm from San Diego, and that was probably in year 2000. And things, Western lacrosse, and especially Southern California and San Diego, has become like a decent little powerhouse, but we certainly weren't that back in the day. I was big and decently athletic, and I remember I got thrown into the mix early, and I was terrible. Oh, man, I was terrible. I didn't know how to scoop a ground ball. I was playing like decently competitive middle school lacrosse. It was slight embarrassment, but I loved the game and ended up, getting really acclimated to how to, get better every day and hitting the wall and learning how to not be a total liability out there. And then an important shift happened in San Diego. What, kids know adrenaline today is this, huge kind of lacrosse conglomerate that has shaped the West Coast. But those guys were all 22 years old at the time, and it started migrating out to the West Coast and started kind of permeating the scene there and started plugging themselves into middle school and high school programs. And all of a sudden we had this influx of like incredible knowledge from guys like Scott Hockstead and Alec Cade and the guys, Steve Cepeda, and the guys that had eventually formed Adrenaline. And so me and my buddies just started soaking up this knowledge, and they put themselves into Torrey Pines High School, which eventually I entered as a freshman. And that was kind of the beginning of my lacrosse career.
That's awesome. I love that area of the country. It's a beautiful little spot. You mentioned you got involved. The Adrenaline people started coming on the scene, and really that's what helped elevate certainly Western lacrosse, but definitely, like you mentioned, right in that little hotbed of San Diego with Torrey Pines. You're playing at Torrey Pines. I'm assuming that you're playing on the West Coast Stars teams, because those are the guys coaching it. What was your recruitment process like going into college? When did you want to know you wanted to play college lacrosse?
Sure. So to put it in perspective, West Coast Stars didn't even officially start until I was in college. And so we had, like, me and my buddies who graduated in 2004, we ended up having like a pretty decent group. And so we had a couple of those guys, Hamilton Pollard, who played pro for the Bayhawks and played at LXM and played in the MLL. He says to me and my buddy, I want to start a club. And so what do you want our names to be? And we're in history class. And I, to this day, don't recall literally what prompted this idiocy, but we formed the club Rotten Cheeseburgers. Something happened in history class, and that was where the name came from. And so the Western, like the Adrenaline shootout and some of those big, like those massive tournaments today, we were doing that at Sonoma State University, and things started getting really competitive. And so that was kind of the inception of what kids know today as these massive Adrenaline recruiting showcases. And so for me personally, I had skipped a grade kind of early on, so I was really young for my age. I was as big as I am now and a big fat behemoth out there, but started wanting to get recruited at a heavy level. And I decided early on that I was going to go to attend. I was fortunate enough to attend Deerfield Academy as a postgraduate. And so again, we were playing our seed and very successful. We were getting a little bit of looks, but this is, again, I'm dating myself. I ended up going to top 205 in Maryland, which at the time was the bee's knees. Certainly no longer a thing. And I'll tell you this, like, and this is awkward to talk about for me, but like all of a sudden I look around, it was day 2 of 205, and I got Coach DeLuca coming up to me who's at Cornell at the time. I've got Bill Tierney, and I've got the Maryland coaching staff as we're on their campus saying, would you go forego Deerfield Academy to come be a freshman next year? And I was like so blown away and so humbled. But those guys had kind of put a mentality in our heads, the adrenaline guys, of like, go out there, you can compete, you can be athletic. And so I committed. I ended up, after going to recruiting visits to Maryland, most of the Ivies, Syracuse, I ended up committing to Cornell prior to attending Deerfield Academy, and was just like blown away that I was going to be fortunate enough to attend an Ivy League university. And, for me, I wanted to attend a great school, but I wanted to attend a school that if I was going to play this much lacrosse, I wanted to compete for a national championship, and Cornell hit all those boxes for me.
So you've been recruited by the big teams. You end up going to Cornell. What was it like at Cornell? I've never been there. What is it like there?
So, again, those criteria where I wanted to attend an incredible academic institution. I really want to compete for a national championship. And also Cornell had this blend of like, at the time, Torrey Pines was 4,000 kids. So the notion of going to a college that was comparable or even smaller than my high school just didn't acclimate to me. And Cornell is one of the bigger Ivies with about 15,000 grad and undergrad. It was my recruiting visit. It was like the most beautiful time of the year in the early part of the summer. And I wanted a chance to play early. And Cornell still is, I believe, the hardest working, like our fitness regimen is the toughest in the country. As a guy who was 6'4", 240 pounds, that was a tough fit for me. I believed in myself, and our coaching staff, told me that if basically, I continued to compete, I could get a spot playing early on. And so I played in every game my freshman year, was a guy who's just kind of grind, playing on man down. And we had an incredible group of seniors that it was the senior class was only 5 guys at that point, but they were just incredible mentors and helped shaped a big part of who I am today. And I feel so fortunate. And like, any kids that we helped get recruited back in the day, I would tell them that culture was so important. So ended up being a 3-year starter there, beautiful campus, incredible facilities, and we were top 5 every single year that I was there. And it was just a blast.
Do you have a favorite memory from playing at Cornell? Maybe it was a game, maybe it was a certain road trip.
Yeah, I mean, my freshman year, we lost to the UMass team. We lost by a goal to the UMass team with Sean Morris that ended up going to the finals. My sophomore year, we were undefeated the entire year. We were number 1 all year. One of my best memories was a week before one of my worst, when we beat Albany in overtime. There's like a clip out there of Brett Queener snapping his stick over his leg. It was one of the coolest moments in the world. I didn't even know that my parents were in the stands, and kind of found out after, and remember like hugging my mom, and it was so amazing. And then fast forward a week later, we're in the Final Four, which was obviously, I think still today is the biggest Final Four attendance. It was at 52,000 at M&T Bank Stadium. The Cornell boys, who were undefeated all year, went down 11-3 and had the flu at the time. And I'll tell you, with the humidity in Maryland, going down 8 goals, things were pretty rough. And we went on an 8-0 run and tied the game up with 15 seconds left, and hadn't lost a face-off in about an hour. And Zach Greer, God bless him, grabbed a unbelievable Canadian handle on the crease. And we had been spending 90 minutes climbing back into the game, and he sniped one with 4 seconds left, which was super great. And, my senior year, we were up 3 with 3 minutes to go, getting Syracuse in the finals. Somehow gave that lead away. That was rough. But again, to play in front of that many people, again, like football schools played like in front of 100,000 people every weekend, but like for the lacrosse world, to do that and to jump into that scene for the Final Four is so unbelievably special. So those are some of the great memories I had.
I've talked to a couple college coaches before, and they've always said that, once you get to the Final Four, really anything can happen. And really the achievement is getting to the Final Four.
Yeah.
And then obviously winning a championship would be icing on the cake. Do you feel that
Yeah.
way? Do you feel accomplished because you've been on teams that went to the Final Four?
I do. I mean, that's a great way to put it. And frankly, the stakes just change. I think a lot of quarterfinals have attendances of like 15 to 20,000 people, which is for lacrosse is great. And, they're usually like in these really intimate stadiums like Hofstra or Princeton, Cornell hosts sometimes. So that's incredibly special. But like taking that leap to next weekend where you're immersed in this experience, and I think about that, on a much smaller scale, or a much bigger scale rather, but like watching the Final Four for basketball just now, like that scene and like just riding with your team, and especially the Final Four is great because school's basically over. You basically get to go to practice every day, you train, you recover, and you're watching film, and just all of a sudden you're stepping onto a field where, NFL, in NFL stadiums, and you look up and it's just remarkable. And the noise is deafening, and it's just, the stakes are just so big, and it's so special.
And that's awesome. Hopefully one day I'll get to experience that, in some form, hopefully watching the Utes. That would be the ultimate.
Absolutely.
Dream. But what after you graduate, what was sort of your path? Eventually you ended up in Park City. What was sort of your path between then and in Park City?
Sure. So everyone in Cornell basically goes to New York City, and most of the guys have grown up in like Long Island or New York or parts where dad works in finance. And so I was fortunate enough to go to Cornell at some crazy scenario where two of my best friends from Torrey Pines transferred there. And we were kind of fish out of water there with like dad didn't work at Goldman. And so that path just wasn't right for me. I had connected with a Cornell lacrosse alum who had a boutique restaurant group in the West Village and had some spots in Midtown. And so I ended up going, still had a year of eligibility. I had 3 herniated discs and suffered a tremendous amount of pain, and took a year off and had a year of eligibility. And that was, to briefly touch on that, like that was a crazy story where I decided with a buddy, I'm not sure if you ever met him while he was here, Todd Fiella, but we went to Deerfield together. He is a brother of mine, and he had tore his Achilles. He was at Brown. And so we started shopping around together to like, let's go play a year together. So we ended up going on a recruiting visit to Denver. And this is actually a funny story. We're there, we're going, school's basically over. And a lot of the guys are on campus, so we're there for the weekend, and they're interviewing. That was when Jamie Monroe got fired. And it was we'd started to go there when Jamie Monroe was the coach. And then by the time our visit happened, he got fired. And so we're there and we're with the kids. And I remember there's a kid named Andrew Lay, who ended up becoming a big midfield scorer there. He was a sophomore at the time. And he actually like really rubbed me the wrong way. He's a good friend now, but like he says, I'm hearing that Bill Tierney is gonna come here. And Todd's from Brown. I'm from Cornell. We hate him. Yeah. And Princeton has just resurrected itself with a couple of those guys, Chad Wiedmeyer and some of those guys that they had their best. We had just beat them in the quarterfinals at last year. And we look at him like, you dumbass. Like, what do you think? Oh yeah, Bill Tierney's gonna come here.
Yeah.
We wrap up. Coach Torpy, who's at High Point now, is basically interviewing for the job. He's the one showing us around with Coach Brown. He's coming back from interviews. He thinks he's going to get the job. So do we. I go back to San Diego. Todd gives me a phone call and says, Bill Tierney has been named the head coach. And so really blown away. Felt bad for how I treated Mr. Lay, but I hated Bill Tierney. I hated him so much during college. And he calls me a week later and says, this program's a little bit in disarray right now. There's a lot of transition. Like, I need your help. And it ended up being an incredibly special year for me. We won the ECAC that year, beat Loyola in Mile High Stadium in front of 15,000 people. We ended up we had just beat Stony. We ended up losing to Stony Brook in the first round. We had just beat them. So it was a 1-goal game and 2-goal game. And I went from hating Bill Tierney with every fiber in my soul to the guy is one of my favorite people in the world and incredibly special to have him in my life. And that was, I was fortunate enough to be named captain that year. And it was just an honor to kind of be a part of that. And then the next year, turned the Final Four, second year. And so it was super cool. But so after Denver, I ended up going to New York City to work for this little boutique kind of Cornell run restaurant group. And the way that if I'm getting interviewed, this usually comes up in, the Salt Lake trip or whatever, and how I ended up here. I was 22 and just couldn't fathom why I couldn't have my own restaurant group right off the bat without paying any dues. And my former boss looked at me like, you are an idiot. And I just couldn't get it at the time. So I ended up stayed in hospitality and went back to San Diego to work for one of the biggest restaurant groups in San Diego, and then ended up getting out of food and beverage for about 7 years and just kind of needed a break and I don't think I was mature enough or ready to handle all the ins and outs of what food and beverage requires. And so was really happy in San Diego. Fast forward, Todd Fiella is living in Park City. I'm in Vegas doing a photo shoot. He says, why don't you come visit me? So I ended up coming to Park City just to hang with him. I hadn't seen him in like 5-6 years. And I find out basically after my second day there, we kept having lunches with these important gentlemen from Park City. And I'm like, the first one, I kind of don't think about it. The guy's like asking me about my career and my interests. And then the second one, I'm like, okay, what's going on? And then the third one, I basically pulled Todd aside, like in the bathroom when we're at lunch. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? And basically like, I could really use a friend here. These have been like pseudo interviews. So there's a month later, I've done 3 phone interviews, and on my way to the airport before I left, I'd sat down with the CEO of a company that's based now here, Athletic Republic, and I ended up taking a job here. So that's how I ended up here. I was tricked and swindled, but absolutely loved the gig and was doing that for about 2.5 years here. Todd, ironically, bailed on me and moved to Texas to be the head coach of Allen High School. And I started coaching at Park City. And that's kind of how that was my first foray into Utah lacrosse here.
And you coached at Park City for a little bit. You started a club team, Prime LC. At this point, are you thinking, are you still wanting to get into hospitality, or, have you kind of, just push that aside for a while? Like at what point do you start kind of thinking again, like, no, I do want to start my own, business?
So the Prime thing, I'm looking around and I think, the guys who were running Blackhawks at the time had assembled like a great crew. Mike Isbell's kids are getting a little older. We're having some talks on the side. And I'm looking at this, like the big piece of my story was like these adrenaline guys when I was they shaped our futures. Like they came out and opened a door for us. It wasn't all like altruistic and righteous. They were partying in San Diego. They had a great time and ended up forming adrenaline. But I looked around at the landscape here and kids were getting a little bit recruited, but like, I think Mike was on the tail end of like establishing this great culture and team. And I wanted to pay it forward to these kids. Like Todd and I coached, we went to that Denver, like national champion, like whatever that, some elite kind of national thing in Utah. We went like 7-0 with Bubba, Josh Stout, Bullet, Mike, like our team. And after that tournament, I was like, okay, we got to put the pedal to the metal here. And so Prime was like a really special thing for me. Running that with Brad Lavoie at the helm, who's still at Westminster at the time, obviously, and Dan Schmidt and Walker Bateman, and like these guys that we had assembled this like pretty dang like good crew of coaches. And all of a sudden we're going to the shootout to play RC, and we're beating them. And we're going to Vegas and we won the tournament. And, that we were establishing a thing. And then, year 2 was like Stout's a senior, Bubba's a senior, Michael, like that team was legit. And it was so fun. We got guys like Ryan Walton who are like coaching the young guys, and we're like feeding this it was, and we're going to these tournaments and people are like, who the hell are you guys?
Yeah.
And Utah, and it honestly, of all the things I've done in my life, it was one of the most special things of all time. In the back of my head, I'm looking around in Utah, I'm working in Park City. I'm kind of blown away at the way that we kind of globally eat here, to be honest. And I'm taking a look around, and I had done it when I was at Denver. I built a deck and a business plan for what some amalgamation of vessel. And so that was when things started in the background. And that was kind of right when Prime took off, and I'm working, 70-hour weeks at Athletic Republic, and I'm going home and I'm working on this at night. And so the way the story goes, this deck had gotten to be like 60 gigabytes and I didn't really have anywhere to put it as I was sharing it around. So I put it on our corporate Dropbox at Athletic Republic. My former CEO, Charlie Graves, and I are having lunch one day, and he says, "Hey, found this deck on the Dropbox. What's going on here?" And he's like, basically this conversation was, "It looks like you put a tremendous amount of work here, and I think you should go do it," which is why he's one of my all-time favorite people. And it was so cool. And the unfortunate kind of casualty of that was Prime, because I just, it was so special to me, and we had done some great things, and I felt like I owed it to these kids. And we were, all of a sudden I'm on the phone with Princeton, Maryland, Syracuse, and like peddling Bubba and Stout. And then the Rutgers thing starts happening with those boys, and we're plugging these kids into D1 schools. And at the same time, I couldn't maintain it. And so at the same time, Brad decides he's going to probably leave Westminster. A couple other things happen, and I felt really bad about that, because we had kind of created this conglomerate of started siphoning kids who were really super committed. And I felt really proud of this culture, but unfortunately I just couldn't do it. And then when our backup plans failed, things crumbled really quick, and that sucked. It was brutal. But I think, some kids got, what we had done, I think what we moved the needle a little bit with is we had escalated West Coast Stars and some of these teams looking at our kids. And so we started feeding more kids in there even after Prime was gone. Again, Dubs, Ryan Walden had established this great rapport with his first group of Prime kids. And then they formed this rad little team of Rocky Mountain Rippers. And then they had their own special little thing. So watching that kind of wrap up this last year, that was 6 years later, seeing that and what he did with those kids, and I would talk, some of their parents of the Rocky Mountain Rippers kids are investors of ours, and you could tell that he had built something super special. So even though that Prime failed, there was a couple cool things that came from it.
Definitely, and I should point out that Vessel Kitchen is a sponsor of this podcast and the Utah Lax Report, and we definitely appreciate that. And it's because of your lacrosse background, but also your investors' background as well. They also love lacrosse, and so it's definitely awesome. You get the go ahead basically from your current boss to go and do this. What happened next? I know you opened the location in Park City first, but was that the first place you looked at? Kind of how did that all come together?
Well, again, lacrosse is a special little community, and I start kind of casually having some dialogues, taking that massive deck I had built, and I had been fortunate to make some really great connections through Park City Lacrosse and Prime, and just being in the Park City community with some people that had funding that I didn't. And we ended up assembling a crew of a handful of investors that were most of them from the lacrosse community, who believed in the vision. And so we were taking a big risk. Things fell together with the space. All of a sudden we were funded. We were doing things on the cheap, and really just saying let's see if our intuition here is right. And we opened in August of 2016, and the doors got blown off from day one. It was so humbling. It was so remarkable. I didn't sleep for 90 days. So that was kind of brutal, but it was it was my first entrepreneur, you could call Prime entrepreneur, but it was my first real kind of entrepreneurial venture. And I just felt really fortunate to have had the Park City community and the Utah community in general just respond so well. And so we grinded for about a year and a half and just tried to do, we've kind of operated as little mad scientists since we started, where our menu changes incredibly rapidly. If we have an idea, we run with it. Sometimes we mess up, and if we need to rectify something, we do so, and that's kind of held us in good stead. And then our hope was always that we looked at the Utah landscape and said, we think that people can eat quality food at an affordable price point, and that can be accessible. And so to wake up 5 years later and to have 4 restaurants and have opened 3 in the Valley is still really cool. And so the pandemic was really rough for sure, but to be standing here and feeling like we're even stronger than before, March of last year is just a testament to our team and kind of the fortitude that you had to have to make it through this thing.
What are some of the lessons that you learned either in high school or in college on the lacrosse field that have applied to, opening a business, running a successful business?
I would say we ended up having a meeting, my partners and I, about a week or about 3 days before the big kind of announcements on the major news networks happened for the pandemic. And we kind of had it like it reminds you of like a huddle where it's like everyone puts their hands in, and it was like, no idea what's about to happen here. Seems like it's bad. We had, I remember that day we had the guys from the owners of Mo Betta's in the building. And I remember one of them, like Keelani's walking out and we said, hey, are you paying attention to this like Corona stuff? At the time it was like this Corona Ghibli. And he's like, yeah, not really. Like, I think we're talking about it or whatever. And we kind of were like, I don't think people know. I don't know what we've seen, but something triggered it in us. Maybe it was Joe Rogan. It was probably Joe Rogan, but we just said, no matter what, let's do what we can for our team and let's like stick to our guns. And so I would say, especially in lieu of the last year, what I've told people before is like, just like, that game where we're down 8 goals against Duke and everything looks bleak. It's like the little wins felt bigger this last year. And all of a sudden you look around and you're like, I'm in the trenches with these people. And like, we have 130 staff now, which is like crazy. And it's like, we got to roll together and stick together or we are not going to make it here. And we're watching restaurants drop like flies. And it was just like, let's stay true to who we are and let's abide by the principles that got us here and let's take care of each other. And a year later, I think establishing that foundation early really helped us in good stead. Yeah.
Where did the name come from?
So I was quoted in some early articles. I probably should have known better, but again, I'm 250 pounds and literally 250 pounds with a really slow metabolism. And so I was eating the healthiest options I could get in Park City was a Cafe Rio salad, which, as anyone knows, is probably like 1,800 calories. Delicious, and so what I put in my body always has mattered. And I just wanted something that represented that your body, like the things that you put in your body is important. And so your body is this vessel and it takes you through the voyage that is your life. And if you give it good fuel, it'll take you to better places. And so was kind of the core ethos of ours of like, we have mashed potatoes and mac and cheese and stuff like that, but we wanted to guarantee that you were going to have quality ingredients. And if you want to eat Whole30 or keto or paleo Monday through Thursday, you can do so at a really high level. And if on Friday you want to have mashed potatoes, mac and cheese, or whatever, it's going to be a little bit more calorically dense, sure, but you're going to know that it's got super quality ingredients and that it's just built with the right stuff. And so, yeah, your body. Your body is everything. And so you just got to give it good stuff if you want to make it in this life.
Going back to your previous answer, when you talked about the Mo Betta's, his son plays lacrosse. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
Yeah. Kalani's son is a senior at Highland. Plays pole. He's a threat. We'll put it that way.
He's a threat. I like that. I'll let him know I heard that on the grapevine next time I see him.
Yeah, no, super good family. I sat in front of him at a game just recently. So another lacrosse friendly establishment is Mo Betta. So You want to talk about high calorie mac and cheese?
Yeah.
It's there. Sure. It's yummy. What does the future hold for Vessel?
So, we were expanding pretty rapidly and we had these big kind of grandiose plans, and the pandemic will humble you. And honestly, like I said earlier, like we're super proud of what we've been able to accomplish, and that we honestly, frankly, like last month with 4 stores finally open was our biggest month that we've ever had in the company. And like to say that is rad. What we're doing right now, like we've always kind of done, is like we're trying to push the envelope. So like right now we're doing some like big kind of conceptual things of like looking at commissary kitchens to grow like the breadth of like our dessert program and baked breads and sauces and stuff like that, and then house everything to improve consistency, and then kind of ship that out to the stores and continue to give us the ability to expand. Some of those initiatives will give us the ability to expand. We've got our eyes on like Farmington, and we've always looked to go south to, somewhere like Lehigh, South Jordan. So we're kind of getting our footing coming out of the pandemic, while also kind of pushing the envelope with some big stuff. So we're going to continue to do what we do and change our menu kind of rapidly and turn everything over seasonally as we always have. And we're hoping to expand our footprint in Utah and hopefully, God willing, get out, expand the Vessel brand outside of the state of Utah.
What do you see as far as your future in lacrosse? Maybe coming back to the sidelines one day?
I got to tell you, in the last year is the first time that I've really started. I've always listen, I'm up every Saturday when watching Bubba at Maryland. Like I'm watching Garrett still at Rutgers. And I just want to say to him, I am and have always been a guest in this state, and to watch, Will Manny is making my car payments with his support of Vessel every week. But to see what they're doing, I just want, I've been around the block enough to know, and especially with the anecdote with the adrenaline guys of that stuff doesn't happen without someone like you, and the culture that you built here, and the perpetual kind of support of all things lacrosse here in Utah. I've always just felt like a guest, in your house, and just always felt really fortunate. So I'm thrilled to be talking today. And it's the first time I felt like I went to the prime closure was really rough for me. And if there's a way for me to get back into lacrosse right now, I would love to to dip my toes back in and kind of give back to the community. So I'm trying to figure that out right now while my schedule is changing with every passing moment, but I don't know. You've got any ideas? Let me know.
I'm sure we could find something for you. You've got that main location in Park City at Kimball Junction. You've got the 9th and 9th store. You've got the one out in Fort Union, and then one in Sandy. So you've got the wide array covered there of places that people can get Vessel Kitchen. What's your favorite menu item? What's your go-to when you're eating at the restaurant?
Right now, it's probably the chicken and grains. And so, we've got this series of composed dishes where right now I'm trying to kind of get my fat butt back into shape. And after a hard workout, just eating some good, we have these coconut basmati rice and quinoa, shredded chicken, couple delicious kind of really light sauces and some roasted peppers, and it's real nice.
Okay, so there you go. You heard it there first. Any secret menu items for the fans out there?
No, I think the best part about Vessel right now is we've even leaned into that with the pandemic of it's a kind of choose your own adventure situation. So we've created a new dish where you can actually take that a step further. It's called the Vessel, and you can create this your own weird concoction of all your favorite side dishes, proteins, and then now you get a sauce. We've got these beautiful scratch-made sauces and toppings, and you kind of just get to tinker. And I think that's what's really nice. And frankly, as a guy who eats Vessel pretty much every day, it eliminates the ability or the threat of things becoming stagnant, because you get to kind of just pick and choose something different every day.
That's awesome. And again, the website is vesselkitchen.com. You can check out all their locations. Nick, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy. The restaurant world is fast paced, and I appreciate your time. So thanks again for coming on.
Tim, it was a pleasure. I appreciate you and everything you've done for Utah lacrosse, and will continue to do. And just, again, pleasure to be a guest in your house, my friend.
No, we appreciate it. We welcome you with open arms, and let's go catch a game sometime.
I would love that.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it.